Welcome, Seawolves, to another show, to the Wednesday show. And I hope, of course, that you all have something delicious ready in your maybe or maybe not actual special Seawolf mug. And we have a really cool episode today because right now I'm already joined by Will Harris of the Sea Explorer Yacht Club de Monaco, ready to have a nice conversation like last time about some of the technique, some of the race still left, and all the goings on Sea Explorer Yacht Club de Monaco. But first, let's start with the toast. Will, you also have something delicious over there?
First thing in the morning, I've got a coffee as always. So yeah.
Okay, nice. Well, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Oh,
cheers.
Cheers, Will. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, welcome to the show, Will. Great that you wanted to come on again. And let's kind of dive in right away, because it's been, well, one hell of a race, I would say, and still very competitive. Looks like maybe all the way to the last few miles if it keeps on like this. So triply exciting. What's your impressions kind of the race so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's got such it's suddenly become so close. You know, as the boats were sailing back up the South Atlantic, there was kind of some decent sized separations between Yannick, who was leading, and the boats who were kind of slightly behind him. But now it's you know, there was that really weird kind of cold front South Atlantic convergence zone kind of situation, and it just meant that the boats in first just really had no wind, and it allowed everyone to really catch up with them. And now we've got 8 boats who could still win it. So, you know, really exciting now, really interesting. And it's by far from answered at this stage in the race.
Definitely. Did you ever expect it? Like, was there ever inside your team already maybe some conversation earlier that you kind of saw the weather coming on and were already counting a little bit on, yeah, we're going to be able to make this good at some point?
Definitely not. I would say it's you know, we can you know, until you're actually winning by a good few thousand miles, you can never really know what's going to happen. And I mean, it was interesting to think back to the last race where you had Armel and Alex, and basically as they went around Cape Horn, Armel had 800 miles, I think, on Alex, 800 mile lead, and by the time they got to the finish, Alex was within 100 miles. So, you know, we're kind of aware that situations like that can happen, but the way it's played out, you really couldn't have foreseen that until a few days before it was actually happening. So definitely not something we were relying on by any means. You know, if we'd gone around Cape Horn winning, that would have been a much better situation, but that's just how it plays out. That's kind of sailing for you. You win some, you lose some. And that's kind of how the situation's played out.
Yeah. It's cool to see that almost it is, of course, one big race, but you know, technically it's almost like it's lots of short races all together, and you can kind of win really individual pieces of the race. And sometimes if you just lose in 2 crucial areas, you can really lose so many miles. Whilst, you know, if you get through the Daltons relatively fast, it can certainly mean suddenly that you're, you know, losing or gaining like 500 miles on an opponent. It's so sobering in a way to see so much skill at work, and then, you know, have something thrown in your face that can, you know, make it all, you know, count double or actually completely negate all your effort. Must be so tough also emotionally. Is that also your experience in this type of races, that it's hard to balance that element of, you know, Lady Fortune a little bit and, you know, what you put in yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting that you brought up this point of emotions, because the races like this, really, you have to have such a level head to deal with the scenarios like this. You know, everyone's pushing for every little percent in the boat whenever they possibly can, really work on the boat as hard as possible. But you can then go run the routing and see that in 4 days' time, it's not going to make any difference, because you're all going to end up in the same place. I mean, the situation can go either way. It can end up being like what's happened here, where they've all piled up and ended up together, but it can also jump and extend the other way. So, you know, it's the way the weather plays out, it's always kind of going to be a bit like that. But you know, you've always got to be pushing at 100% and trying to either get to the next weather window or you know, try and make your jump on your competitors. But at the same time, you've really got to be careful of kind of your expectations, and not get too excited when things go your way, and not get too down when they don't, and that's just kind of the way it works. And you've got to try and keep a level head and be completely unemotional about it the whole time, because the more emotional or worked up you get, with this sort of racing, there's the game is kind of the weather and the strategy, but you've got to be, in order to get to those different positions, you've got to sail the boat fast and be that 1 or 2% faster than your competitors. But at the same time, it's trying to balance your emotions so that you don't waste too much energy on kind of being emotional about, oh great, I've gained loads, or I'm really down, I've lost loads. It's all about using that energy on the race rather than how you're feeling about it. And having that balance is really tricky, and especially like a Vendee Globe. It's an 80-day race. It's so much. It's a third of 1 year of your life, and
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's so much commitment into that one decision, that one moment when suddenly the weather situation means that all your competitors are going to catch up with you. So
right.
And that situation, when it happened to Yannick, it must have been pretty brutal. But now, on another sense, Boris, now that he's been given this opportunity, he's now the one who's got to keep a level head and keep sailing as best as he can towards the finish.
Yeah. It must feel even worse maybe if you're ahead in many ways, right? Especially if you're ahead long, because you keep looking at yourself like, I'm ahead. Damn, they're all behind me. Damn.
Yeah.
But it must be. Sometimes it's doubly hard, right? It's great. It's a good feeling to be in first, but it's also kind of doubly tough because you got nobody ahead to fight you. Kind of a nice balance. What do you think of kind of what the sailors have been given so far as weather goes? Because it has been the weather's different always every year, but it has been quite interesting to see that we're so much slower than the previous edition, for example, really days and days. What do you think of the weather situation so far, kind of throughout the race?
No, yeah, you're completely right. It's been a really strange and, in particular, a slow year in terms of weather. Mm-hmm. Not something we really expected, and there's so many different features you can talk about it. But I think what's firstly quite interesting to point out is the doldrums. They've just crossed back up to the Northern Hemisphere doldrums. Mm-hmm. Have I just disconnected there again?
No, you're still here.
Still here?
Yeah.
And so the doldrums on the way down, when the boats were sailing further towards the east, normally expect the doldrums to be worse in the east and better in the west. And it's kind of been almost the reverse in this edition of the Vendee. As the boats sailed down through the doldrums, it was quite relatively easy to pass through. Mm-hmm. And now as they're sailing back up further to the west, they've actually had some tricky moments where it's been very difficult to get through them, and very light winds. Mm-hmm. But there's so much more to that. If we look in the after the start, they had the very challenging conditions of strange trade winds, not really much trade winds. The tropical storm Theta coming through, going to the South Atlantic, there was just high pressure after high pressure. Not really many options to sail through that very quickly, and suddenly that's built up to being kind of more than a week behind the record in the last edition of the race, when in the last 4 years we've seen massive jumps in terms of technology and foil technology. So it's been really strange. And then I think when we did this last call, the boats were approaching or they hadn't got into the Southern Ocean yet, and it's been very interesting to see how these foiling boats have performed in the Southern Ocean in the conditions. It's sure that they were hit by several kind of weather systems with huge waves set 6-7 meters, as you'd expect, and the fact that the foilers weren't that quick, or didn't make much advantage. It was very interesting to see and to kind of understand. And I think going into the next 4 years, every team who's building a new boat or developing kind of their boat, they'll definitely be considering the data from this and how they're going to use it in the future. But in terms of the weather, it's the Southern Ocean, I'd say, was relatively typical, having the number of systems they had, but it's just the Atlantic route seemed to have been much slower than previous editions.
Yeah. And did you also find the fact that we have kind of the, especially in the Southern Ocean, that the weather a bit more predictable there, of course, but that the foiling versus non-foiling thing, especially in the Southern Ocean, where there was kind of this big expectation, that the foils, like we already knew from the previous editions, that the foils had the power to outperform the non-foilers to a good degree, let's say. Actually, more in the last edition, far more in the last edition than this edition. But in many ways, we see, of course, some foilers ahead, but we see also several non-foilers with that hunting pack in front. So it's kind of interesting to see that through all of the different weather conditions, that there is definitely a feeling of an overall advantage. But for me also, it's a lot less strong, let's say, than I would have expected it to be at the beginning of the race. Well, what's your feeling on that?
I mean, I think it's clear that having a foiling boat is an advantage, and I although there has been non-foilers up at the front of the fleet, up at the front end of the fleet, like I said, the Atlantic from the start down to the South Atlantic was a very kind of a strange and tricky situation with very not much advantage at all for the foilers. And so what that meant is it meant that all the non-foiling boats could kind of stay in contact with these foiling boats. If it was kind of a more normal year or a more kind of typical situation, you would expect to see these foilers 500, 600 miles ahead before you even got to sort of into the first part of the Southern Ocean. So
yeah.
I think that having the foils is still definitely an advantage, but we did see in the Southern Ocean that with the conditions you get down there, it's very hard to benefit from them due to the sea state and the waves. And we fully expected that before we started the race. We did as much training as possible in kind of big sea states like that, and it's fairly clear that once you've got a decent sized swell, it's pretty much impossible to overtake it. A monohull boat, and so you kind of have to just accept that this is sort of the speed of the boat, and depending on how big the waves are, the more that influence it. It's very difficult to kind of say exactly how each swell and each system will affect the boat on its speed. So that makes routing very difficult. If the waves are 20 degrees more off one side, the direction of them, then that will have a huge impact on kind of the speeds and the angles that you can sail with the boat. And so
it was quite interesting. I find it very interesting, especially cool that Boris and Jean both filmed it when they were kind of ping-ponging past each other several times, with like the wind going down a bit, Jean flying past Boris, the wind going up just 1-2 knots, Boris flying past Jean again, and doing that several times, kind of ping-ponging back and forth. It was a very cool, like, kind of insight into kind of what the flip over point is between the conditions, let's say, where all of a sudden the advantage of either technology becomes so apparent all of a sudden, which is quite interesting, I thought.
Yeah, just the comparison between the boats was really interesting to see. And some of the non-foiling boats have also sailed an incredible race, by not having this hassle of foils and kind of a new less tested boat. It's allowed some of the kind of more experienced sailors and boats, more experienced boats who've already been through the Southern Ocean several times and kind of have learned all the things that don't work with them and things that do work with them. And as a result, you can just push a lot harder. Whereas, as we've seen, the foilers are really in protection, kind of defensive mode the whole time through the Southern Ocean. And every boat, I think, with the new generation foils has had some sort of issue, whether it be structural, whether it be with the foil or something like this. And it's just to do with the kind of increased loads, really, of that you have as a result of the foils. So it's been very interesting to follow the Southern Ocean, because we went into this not really sure what the outcome would be, and it's quite clear as to what it is. The foils aren't as great as we thought they'd be in the Southern Ocean.
Yeah, right. That's cool. But I'm sure that this will, I mean, as a result of this, I'm sure there will be a lot of conversations and optimization, and sure some interesting new thinking will come out of it. And of course, the foil is really not the only thing that took center stage either willingly or unwillingly at different parts around the race. There were a few other things. Generally, Sea Explorer has been a great boat, and Boris has maintained her incredibly well. One of the few sailors, maybe even the only one with really no real big, structural problems of note. Although he did, of course, start with the J2 hook problem that several of the sailors had. A lot of interest from people actually asking about that throughout the race. Can you maybe explain once really good what exactly is the issue with this? Why is that hook there? Because there's no halyard apparently. Like, what's the advantage there? And can you explain a bit what exactly this problem is, which seemed to be so tenacious and forced several of the skippers to climb their mast, including Boris had to do the same thing, I think.
Yeah. So it was the Jenica hook that Boris had a problem with. So that was just before he got into the kind of roaring 40s Southern Ocean conditions in the on the descent down the Atlantic. And basically what it is so because the loads on a 60-foot IMOCA with sails of this side is just so much, you can't really hold the load of the sail while it's unfurled on a rope on a halyard. The pressure and compression it puts through the mast, the pressure on the rope, it just means that you'll chafe through it pretty quickly and it wouldn't survive 80 days. So instead of this, you have a mechanism which hooks in the sail into a kind of metal fitting and a swivel, and which firstly, it holds the sail in place using a kind of very strong piece of metal. And as well as that, it will allow the sail to unfurl once you actually want to deploy the sail, because obviously it's rolled up while you hoist it. And what's happened at the start of the race was this mechanism was becoming jammed for some of these boats. My opinion is that we were sat on the docks in the Vendee Globe for 3 weeks, not using these hooks. As a result, while it was sat there for 3-4 weeks not being used, it just became jammed and just needed a clean and a service to get it going. But unfortunately for these sailors, it happened at the right at the start of the Vendee Globe, and they were by themselves already. And for Boris, it happened just as he was going to the South Atlantic. We're not too sure why it got stuck. It's working again now. He just gave it a clean and a service, and it was fine. It's really strange because they've been reliable for us all year. We've never really had a problem with it. And Boris was lucky enough that he wasn't in too terrible conditions and was able to climb the mast quickly during the night before he got into the Southern Ocean. But in terms of Boris's situation, we've been very lucky that he hasn't had anything too major. I think that's because he's sailed very conservatively, and he's really preserved his boat. The goal is to really finish this race and to get to the finish line, collect all the science data. And now there's a bit more at stake for the race. It's
I dare say he probably is getting more and more daring, let's say, over the next few days. There were, of course, also a few other things. The hydros, notably, we talked about that also before. And I guess later in the race, he fixed them and was able to put them in the water again. And we kind of talked about that already, that they're just not built for that type of speed, I guess, when they go over a certain speed, right?
Yeah, it's, since we are kind of trying to be a fully renewable boat, we really wanted the hydros to work the whole way around, and we've put so much work into them before the start of the race. The guys who work on the boat, thinking of different systems, because we'd already had one rip off before, and that's simply because when you're foiling, the speed accelerations and decelerations, the way the hydros work is they'll adjust how much friction they put in their kind of turbine. And they'll adjust depending on the speed of the boat. But because we accelerate and decelerate so quick, it doesn't really have time to change the friction in the blades. And so suddenly the load in this trap that holds the hydro generator in the water is just massively increases as Boris will surf down a wave. We already had a limit of not putting them in above sort of 23, 24 knots of boat speed. But sometimes it's just too difficult to predict when a wave is going to come down, and he's got to produce energy, and suddenly it all happened at once. Both hydros kind of broke. The cassettes broke, and Boris had to fix that whole system and put it back on. But by the time we finish this Vendee Globe, we'll have a well-tested hydro system ready to go around the world again. I think.
Exactly. And it's good also that you clarified that little extra, because a lot of people also in the comments were saying like, why can't they build a hydro that can handle 30 knots, right? But I guess it's the switch between the speeds that, it's the balancing mechanism that's the problem, not necessarily the top speed. So that's good for all you seawolves to know also. Okay, I think let's move on to the actual rest of the race, because there is still, of course, a good number of miles to go. But they're very much getting ready, of course, for, let's call it, the final showdown, because that's really what it is. And as of right now, Boris is in 4th place. I'm just taking a quick look at the map here. So can you talk a little bit about the strategy now, and what the important things are going to be as we move closer and kind of move through the Atlantic now, then really into the North Atlantic, and of course finally into the Bay of Biscay as kind of 3 last phases of the race.
I just lost you there for a bit. Do you mind just repeating that one?
Oh, yeah. So I said, of course, so Boris in 4th now. They're making their way, back to the finish. So we're getting ready for the final showdown. Can you talk a little bit about, the strategy, the important points, transitions that we still have to go through now as we go, kind of from the South Atlantic into the North Atlantic, and then finally, of course, into the always extreme, usually Bay of Biscay for the finish?
Yeah. So kind of the situation at the moment is, in the North Atlantic, you've got a pretty well-established trade wind conditions, which they're sailing in at the moment. And that's basically because of the position of the Azores high. At the moment, it's kind of quite squished up somewhere near the Canary Islands.
Yeah.
And that means that you get really nice, consistent trade winds from the east, which the fleet is sailing at about 70 or 80 true wind angle at the moment. So after leaving the doldrums, the foilers have been able to take advantage of their foils finally. Trade winds, you get relatively flat water, not too wavy, really nice, consistent reaching angles. And this is what foiling boats really love. They'll just be gaining miles on each position report on these non-foiling boats, just producing more righting moment, producing more lift, and really going for it. So that's kind of the conditions that they'll have at the moment, and they'll have that for another probably about 24 hours, and you'll be able to tell when they sail too far north to be in the trade winds when they get to the latitude of about the Canary Islands. And what's happening at the moment is you've got kind of the endless North Atlantic depressions moving in from the west sort of situation. And basically the game is just picking which depression do you kind of hook into and stop heading north and start heading towards the east, towards the finish in the Sablon. So as this basically what's going to happen is they'll be sailing just towards the west of the Azores high. They'll sail around get lifted in towards it. And so what they'll do is they'll slowly put more downwind sails, and then they'll have to jibe and then start hooking in towards the first kind of depression moving across, which is effectively a large cold front moving in from the west, and probably quite big breezes associated with this. They'll probably see over 30 knots at least once or twice before they get to the finish. But basically, it's sailing at that point. It's just sailing the best angle towards the finish. At the same time as kind of considering how do I manage to stay in the wind that's or kind of the best wind for my boat towards the finish. And I say the best wind to the boat because as we've seen, it's not always best to have the most wind. The boat's probably fastest and around 20 to 25 knots of wind. Above that, you start having to slow down either as a result of protecting the boat or due to the sea state that's probably associated with the wind. So they'll be looking for that kind of 20, 25 knot areas, I guess, and trying to just stick in them and pointing towards the finish line as close as possible. But luckily enough, they'll be in downwind conditions the whole way with these. When you're on the kind of the southern side of these lows, you get winds prevailing from the southwest, but as each frontal system moves over, sometimes it will shift round to the west, sometimes it will shift round to the south, and really it's just going to be a game of playing with these shifts. And in terms of strategy to the finish, it's going to be very exciting. We'll probably see some boats not following the rest of them, and trying to hook into different systems or fronts.
That was kind of one question that I really wanted to ask you. Like, is there anything on the map that I was kind of looking at it before we went into the interview. Is there any areas on the map still where you're thinking, well, if somebody wanted to force a split and kind of play that game, do you see any? Because the way I'm looking at it right now, there isn't really a lot of options for like a proper AB split where it's like I'm going to go with this slightly different weather system and we'll see what happens. But have you seen any real opportunities there yet, or?
I think you're right in saying that there's no like AB splits. But what it's going to come down to, and I don't think it should be. We can't really overlook at how many miles that this could allow you to gain, but it's going to be in these small timings of your jibes and also the setups and angles of your boat. Once they get to the north of the high pressure, there's sort of several kind of weather features, whether it be a front, whether it be a wind shift, that they'll have to deal with before they get to the finish. And it will all be about timing your jibe or your maneuver with each of these weather features as best as possible, and I mean down to the finest minute. 1 hour in jibing later than someone else, if you get that wrong, that can be 50 miles just to gain there, or it could be even more than that. It could mean that you then miss the next system, and it's difficult to say at this point what is the main features. I think once we get to we can kind of look at the first initial ones, but really it comes down to the finer details, sort of 12 hours before you actually sail into the feature, because they're so active when these North Atlantic lows, they sail as they move across. The North Atlantic, they're very changeable, so you really have to look at the finer details on kind of the grids, on the satellite images, to identify exactly when and where you want to position yourself. And small differences between the boats will make big differences, I think.
Yeah. Do you how do you view the kind of the last part of the battle? Because I think one very interesting thing about having the like we're talking about 8 or 9 boats really close to each other, and still 1 or 2 situations where that might increase to 10 or maybe even 11, or maybe we'll have a bit of a split and it'll be more like 4, 5, 6. Coming close to the finish altogether. But there is, of course, the finish part of the race, where we have a very small area that is a line that actually represents the finish. And of course, to get a bit more into the sailing details of it, sailing in a Mokka at this speed, especially downwind, 25 knots or so, if they're lucky, also in the Bay of Biscay, usually strong winds. Really close maneuvering with these boats is, of course, very tough. It's one of the big weaknesses of this type of fast boats, that they're not dinghies that you can just flip from side to side. We talked about tacking, jibing. It takes 40 minutes easy if you're lucky sometimes. So what does that mean really for the final part of the battle, which is it's not about the long line, but it starts to become suddenly really about precision. And then all of a sudden, we're dealing with boats that you can't just especially when you're downwind sailing, if you go 3, 4, 5 degrees up, let's say, to the relative wind, that may make a huge difference. If you're in 25 knots of wind, that may break your boat. So can you talk a little bit about the final part of the race, and how that will stack up kind of the foilers against each other, or maybe even with some non-foilers in the game, and what kind of very different strategic elements start to really play a part there?
So it's quite interesting, these kind of downwind conditions, because it will be kind of similar to the Southern Ocean, I think. Maybe less extreme, but once they're north of the Azores high, it will be, how they've been sailing in kind of the Southern Ocean systems. It will kind of indicate quite nicely how they're going to perform. And the big difference is, firstly, is what sails does everyone have? Who has the best setup for sailing in kind of downwind conditions like this? Some of the non-foiling boats, they have spinnakers, and that will basically allow them to sail a more direct course, but not as quickly, certainly not as quickly. And also it looks like the conditions are probably a bit too windy to be using a spinnaker. They might just completely go for it and just push all the way, don't care if they tear the spinnaker or something. But and the challenging thing for these foiling boats is with the new kind of sail choices, they're always looking to be using the foils. So they need to sail much higher angles, sort of 140 chew-in angle, while kind of the non-foiling boats are looking for more like 150. And so kind of the strategies there'll be some differences in the strategies, I think. And the way I see it happening, I think that there will be sort of, in these top 8 boats, there'll be about 36 hours between the first one and the last one, depending on everyone's choices. So there's going to be a gap. I don't think it's going to come right down to the line. There's every chance.
What I was really thinking about, you saw the finish here in The Hague, of course, of the Volvo Ocean last time, where we had Bouwe, of course, go a little bit more offshore. I mean, it's literally about 4 miles. It's really not a lot, let's say. And we saw, of course, what was the winner again? Sorry? Dongfeng. Yes, we saw them, of course, taking the really right past the coastline. Now that's literally one tack and a 4 mile difference that presumably cost them the race, let's say, right? And that's something that I think is very interesting. If this type of one tack situations might start to play a role also there, because it's so hard to tack them. It's not like the Volvo where they have 10 people on board and actually can do that relatively fast if they need to.
No, you're completely right. I would feel very sorry for Boris if it did come down to jibing like they did in the Volvo. He's still one guy on the boat. He's been at sea for probably been at sea for 80 days by the time he reaches the finish. And I mean there's every possibility that every jibe will count. But yeah, it's very difficult to say. It's a tricky way to come into the finish, but I think that the sails that everyone has left as well will be quite an important part of it. And we've been kind of trying to guess as to kind of the situation of each boat. Tom has not got a foil. Charlie must have some sort of damage to his foil because he's not sailing as quick as he should be. Or we kind of heard that there's some issues with Yannick as well. And potentially a lot of these boats could be missing their downwind sails now after using them for 30, 40 days in the Southern Ocean. We could see some boats really slow down because they haven't got the downwind sails anymore. And so that will be quite an interesting part of the race to see as well. Potentially that could open up some gaps depending on what sails everyone has left. But you can maneuver an IMOCA relatively easy. You don't really want to go and do 10 jibes along the Spanish coast, and to what advantage? It's much slower to do a jibe than it is to just keep sailing a bit further on the wrong wind shift. So it'll be a very tactical race to the finish. I think it's all about being smart in these boats and not expending too much energy, and just making really smart decisions to the finish line will be kind of the most important thing, I think.
Yeah. Is there any particular advantage you think that Sea Explorer has in this particular battle that's still here? I mean, all the boats have slightly different things, certain angles where they're a little bit better at. Do you see any particular advantage of your ship in this particular area where you're thinking, that's where we are really also still will have probably a moment to shine compared to PBA or one of the other ships in the same position?
I think it's been fairly clear in the trade wind sailings that we've had, where we've been reaching between 70 and 92 in angle, that our boat is very well adapted to these angles, kind of reaching foiling angles. That always seems to be kind of quite an advantage for us. Now we're going in towards the finish. It's downwind, I mean, we're lucky that at the moment we have all our sails. So having a full sail wardrobe is firstly the biggest advantage. And beyond that, it's very difficult to say, if we get the right angle, and it's ideal for our sail and the right wave direction, then we'll be slightly faster than the other boats. And but in general, for the downwind setups for the foiling boats, we all have a relatively similar kind of downwind package, I would say. For them. So.
Nice. Well, I mean, when we add that all up together, it looks like we're going to have a pretty exciting finish. No matter what happens, it'll be definitely interesting and sailing history, I guess, also. And it would be really cool, like if Boris wins this thing and also becoming the first non-French, person maybe to win the race. Still many really cool things can happen there. One more thing. What is kind of your plan with the team, or can you talk a little bit about your program after the Vendee, to give people maybe a little bit of an idea? If there are some cool milestones after that they can already get ready for.
Yeah, so no, we definitely plan to do some a further campaign and kind of project after the finish of the Vendee Globe. So the program for the 2021 season is we intend to do the ocean race tour, the ocean race tour around Europe, which is in Imoca 60s and in the Volvo 65 boats. That's in May, and that will be really interesting to see, because these foiling boats, we've always learned foiling Imocas, we've learned how to sail them solo, but this race will have 4 or 5 crew on the boat, and you'll really be able to push the boat. We were talking earlier just then about making smart maneuvers, smart jibes, and quick sail changes, and that's exactly what we'll be able to do in this race. It's 4 or 5 legs around Europe. And then
I know. I'm talking actually to Gideon with Childhood, because they're doing it also. So in the V65s, of course. But it's going to be nice.
And then beyond that, we kind of have a plan for the next 4 or 5 years, kind of finishing with the next Vendee Globe in 2024. But in 2022 it will be the ocean race, round the world crude race in the Imoca 60. And then going on from that, it's the TJV at the end of this year. And also there's potentially the Fastnet race over in the UK, which is also quite a good one. So nice. several races in the calendar. We're always alongside our sailing campaign, we of course have the science campaign, and we're always looking for partners to kind of join with that, associate with that. We've made a really nice campaign with Kuehne+Nagel this year, and the 3 shipping carriers who have kind of supported us through this, as well as the Yacht Club de Monaco. And we really want to create a project where we can kind of make use of the fact that we're racing around the world, but we can have a second motive, and that's for the science and for the research that we're collecting while we're doing this race. When Boris hopefully arrives in the Sable d'Olonne, he'll have a full lap of the planet worth of CO2 data, which is
that's actually a super interesting point. Sorry to interrupt you, but we had, of course, I forget his name, Jan, I think, make a visual dashboard, actually one of the Seawolves. I think I sent it to you also. Yes, like putting all the data on the track. Thank you, Jan, for that. Super cool. And that was actually quite interesting to see. Like, I browsed through the data. I didn't really have time to really dive into it super deeply, but I could already see several things in the data set where I was like, not quite what I expected, as far as pressures in the sails and heeling angle in the Southern Ocean, and a lot of things where I would have intuitively thought, it's probably this, and it looked like it was quite different. So I bet there's going to be a lot of interesting things coming out of that.
Yeah, and it's so interesting as well, because with this CO2 data, we're measuring CO2 in the water at surface level, and in the Southern Ocean and the Southern Pacific, there's never been a data set collected down in that region of the ocean before. So what we'll be able to do is transfer this information to scientists who can kind of analyze it, and like you were saying there about the heel angle or the wind speed, I didn't really expect that. They can say, that's interesting, I didn't really expect to see that, and maybe that will spark interest as to kind of how CO2, the ocean uptaking CO2 will how it's kind of how the cycle and kind of the process is actually working, and what impact it is actually having on our ocean. But you know, we're really excited to kind of, we're at this stage with that part of the project, and we really want it to keep progressing in the future, and that's a really nice kind of aspect to our campaign as well, and something we want to work towards more and more in the future, and spreading the message as much as possible about climate change and different ways that we can help combat it and kind of unite together and work for a better future. So
yeah. Well, I think you guys have definitely been a great example so far with this race, to put a big spotlight on that. And I think Boris also has been really one of the entertainment stars, I think, of the race, also with his great videos and smug, funny commentaries and stuff, which are really super enjoyable to watch. So thanks also for that, and of course for your commentary also. And I think that's a great conversation for today. And I'm sure that probably in the not too distant future we'll sit down again. I thought actually maybe it would be cool to a little bit later do a more of an in-depth sailing talk, but who knows, maybe if we hang out in Greece at some point, we can actually do that when we're physically together also, like show some different things about relative wind angles and show how it actually works while sailing. I think we have a lot of cool options to maybe show some cool principles in action.
Yes, no, exactly. There's all this data as well we have from the race. So once the race is finished and we're allowed to kind of look at more in depth into it, then that will be really interesting to kind of see what we've learned from this lap of the planet. And like the amount of use that we've had from the dashboard has been really phenomenal, kind of having that live data coming back from Boris all the time. Really glad to see people have used it, like Lucas, in the way he's created this other dashboard. And it's really just so interesting to see all these kind of data points and variables coming back from the boat. So really interesting to see all of that.
Yeah, definitely. Some good nerding times ahead for exploring in the data and making some future models. Okay, well, very much thank you for the conversation today, Will, and I guess we'll talk to each other again later.
Great. Thanks so much, Florian.
Thanks, man.
Bye.
So that was Will Harris. Very nice to talk to him again, and I'm sure he'll be back at some point later. Now that we've done that, let's get to the update in the Trophée Jules Verne, because while we've been talking, Gitana 17, the Edmund de Rothschild, of course, is taking no prisoners, and as we kind of foreseen yesterday, that with the great conditions that they have right now, they've kept increasing their avance from yesterday, end of the day, 670 nautical miles, now all the way up to 931. So yesterday, while we're on the show, they were a little bit over 800 already, and so they added another 100 or so miles to their lead, and they have a little bit more time. So as we can see, the Iinterview is now more or less halfway through the last day, where their track is not so super long yet, where they didn't have just an amazing day speed-wise. But after midnight tomorrow, that's going to be over, and then the speed is going to be fully on, and it's going to be no more mistakes time for the crew on board of Gitana. But so far they're doing really good. As you can see, the weather looks really good, and so the strategy behind these boats, of course, is that they're so fast, traveling at roughly between 30 and 40 knots, and in general the fronts that are kind of moving around here, so kind of the low pressures that are moving around the planet, unimpeded, like I explained several times before. There's no land mass to stop any of the weather around Antarctica. It's the only place where waves and wind can go all the way around the planet with just nothing to stop them. And so the essence of this record attempt is that these boats actually follow these systems and can travel at the speed, because most of these pressure systems are traveling, so mostly they're traveling towards the east, so they're going from west to east with the race, and they're traveling between 30 and 40 knots for the most part. And so the idea of this trophy is to kind of hitch a ride, let's say, with the boat on one of these systems. And so that's what the Maxi Ebb and the Rothschild is doing right now. So they've entered this kind of storm that you see kind of a little bit located still to the south of them, but they're on the edge of that. And the plan is going to be, obviously, to you know, ride this storm as long as they possibly can, and preferably, if at any point it kind of moves, you know, towards the South Pole and they kind of lose that particular system, to get into position to be picked up right away again by the next one, attempting to never really lose you know, a system at all along the ride. That's kind of the trick of it, let's say. And so for now they're in an excellent position to follow this particular system into the Southern Ocean, and we'll see over the next 24 to 36 hours, you know, how they fare really being in the Southern Ocean. We've seen Sodibu, of course, do its thing here, but we haven't seen the Maxi, the Ebb and the Rothschild in the Southern Ocean really yet within this race, because they didn't make it so far last time. So it will be super cool, you know, to be able to really compare kind of the distance that Gitana is able to travel compared to that of IDEC. We can see the day point here of Gitana is a little bit hidden behind IDEC here, but if we look visually at the lengths, you know, we see that 30 knots or so average, you know, that they are very close to that also. So we see that a really good day for IDEC Sport, not very very different from a really good day for Gitana. And so it will be a big question that we're going to get answered over the next 2-3 days is, yeah, is Gitana able, just like IDEC, to really ride these systems, and is it going to be the same speed, or because the design should make it a little bit faster potentially, or are they able to maybe even in the Southern Ocean now win you know, every day still some extra miles. So we'll have to see how that goes. But that's it for the goings on with the Trophee Jules Verne right now. Then let's look at the situation in the Vendee. Of course, me and Will just talked about it. So we see that the leaders still all quite close to each other. For the Jean fans, Jean actually moved up one place now officially from 9th to 8th, and I think earlier in the day he was even 7th for a little for a few seconds there, but in 8th position now, so a solid gain, which is good to see. And we see you know, at least kind of two strategies here, in the sense that Lewis Burton really taking a very different tack, moving much more now, really about the, you know, the distance of almost of the coast of Spain, let's say, next to France there, more to the west, counting on the fact that it will of course give him a better passage through the system here, and more wind here, earlier wind here, to connect and stay ahead. But yeah, I don't know if that actually is going to pay off, concerning the much shorter route now that all the other sailors are sailing it, because he's still adding, you know, 300 or 400 miles to the west now of them. So that is a pretty good distance, let's say. If we take Charlie here in first, and we take yeah, Jean. So Jean is about 350 nautical miles behind. So I would say probably that Lewis is right now then about 300 nautical miles to the west. That's still a lot of time, right? That's just almost a full day at full speed to make good. That he has to make good somehow, and I don't see him really building a lead based on speed that kind of justifies that type of extra space. But we'll see how that develops. Other than that, everybody of course fighting like lions, so that's nice to see. Boris doing amazing speeds, Linked Out also doing amazing speeds. Pretty much everybody here is really going super fast, and yeah, interesting to see that Jean with his 15.4 24-hour average and doing 16.1 now, that we're kind of seeing that the other three gents there consistently. So Giancarlo Pedot we have here, we should have here, let me get this out of the way, we should here, yeah, so Damien Seguin 14.1, so those two at least significantly slower than Jean. So potentially, if he keeps sailing like this, there's a good chance that you know, it will not take that long for him maybe to move to fifth, maybe even, yeah, so I guess a maximum fifth position. Would be interesting to see if that happens. Don't know, but we'll see. Yannick Besthaven, of course, reporting that he had several problems with his boat just from riding it so hard in the Southern Ocean, and so he has, like what Will said during the interview also, so it's beginning to play a role that some of the sailors in the head of the fleet, because they've been at the head of the fleet all this time, don't have so much spare wear and tear, let's say, left in their sail pack. So even though they want to push the boat as hard as they can, some of them don't have all their sails anymore at their disposal because they just broke some of them. And in other situations, they may have sails that, you know, still work, but they can't quite maybe push them as hard as anymore as they may want to, because the risk of breaking them is just getting higher and higher. So it's an interesting bunch of factors that are all coming into play here. And so in the middle of that, we see Boris Herman with the Sea Explorer Yacht Club de Monaco doing really well in third place. And if we have to believe Will, you know, he's really spared his boat so far till at least about 3 days ago, and really putting the hammer down now, getting closer to Apivia. So that's kind of cool. And he is, you know, really quite close, 200 nautical miles or so away. So yeah, we'll see how it develops, but there's definitely a good chance for Boris, if he has some luck and keeps sailing well, to maybe overtake at some point. So we'll have to wait and see. Then we see, of course, Maxime Sorel doing okay, but still considerably slower than the rest of the boats around him, and especially than Armel, who was doing a 24-hour average of 16.5 knots, while Maxime is only doing 12.2. So yeah, he's through the doldrums now, doing a good speed. And as I said, Armel's been quite extremely lucky with the doldrum situation now, so he came through there really super fast. If we look at his 24 hours, 16.5 all the way through the doldrums, so he didn't really significantly slow at all. And yeah, if he keeps going like this, he'll definitely catch up with Maxime Sorel, I think, before they really get to the Azor High. So that's kind of cool to see. Clarice Kramer, same thing, so she's doing well now, obviously everything working again, fixed the sail as we saw yesterday, and she's doing a beautiful 16.8 knots right now, 13.9 average, so just keeping pace, and it looks like she's going to have a good passage through the doldrums. A little bit of lighter weather, but shouldn't be too extreme, so she should be able to move through relatively okay also, so good news for her there. Then Romain Athanasio, sailing very nicely there, you know, in good trades now, so he has a good day and a half of nice trade wind sailing ahead of him. And then we get to Cherelle in 14th place now, and yeah, the light winds that I thought would be over actually spread a bit more over that area, and we see that yeah, everybody there pretty much, we can kind of look at that whole group, so that's basically from Kojiro Shirishi all the way to Cherelle. They're all caught in this kind of different bubbles of very low wind there. We see that especially Stéphane Lederijan here really stuck in the middle of the system. And Cherelle has some wind, but yeah, doing 7.9 knots now. So his distance to Romain Athanasio, sorry, still good enough that if he gets out of it, there is still enough space for him to make good on that. But it's getting, the margin is quickly going down. So he really has to hurry into the trades if he still wants to gain one other spot optionally in the classement. Then we have Manuel Cassin sailing nicely past the Falklands, same for Miranda Marin and Clement Gerard. And then getting closer and closer to the Cape, we see Alexa Berrier and Arie Heusela moving in, and the prediction for them still looks good. So relatively light winds because they're so to the south, and tomorrow by the end of the day stronger winds. And it seems like even though it's not such a large storm this time, they will actually get a pretty good ride near the Cape. So we have here 34 knots, so basically probably gust up to 45 again. And it seems like Ari was right when he said that probably they will pass Saturday morning, Saturday midday, and it will be in some pretty strong conditions. So let's see if there may be some beautiful images on board from Ari or from Miranda coming out there. But that's the state of the field, and I guess that is the show for today. So thank you all very much again for watching. Make sure to give the report a thumbs up if you enjoy my reports. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not yet subscribed. Then make sure to also hit the like button to make sure you get the updates. And for all the rest, for our incredible mugs, t-shirts and all the other stuff, go of course to seawolvestv.com. And also there are still, I think, 4 or 5 spots total now left for the coastal clinic on board of childhood Volvo 65. So we're getting very close to the last places now. So if you want to join, don't wait like another 24 hours, because very likely then that opportunity is going to be fulfilled. So go to seawolvestv.com, check out the tab that says the Volvo 65 childhood clinics, and sign up today if you want to join us in Scheveningen in the beginning of April. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you all very much for watching. Have a great evening, and I'll see you all with a delicious cup of coffee tomorrow.